Cupid, draw back your bow and let your arrow go. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Qpid, which is episode 20 of season 4 of Star Trek Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I am up to the 4th season episode, Qpid. So Qpid is the episode where Vash comes on board the Enterprise as part of a archaeology conference and re-sparks her old romance with Picard, but then is bothered by the fact that Picard has not told any of his friends about their relationship and seems very uncomfortable around them with her. This causes a lover's spat between them, and Q, who just happens to show up wanting to give Picard a gift for helping him out in last season's episode, decides that the best gift that he could give Picard is to teach him a lesson on how his love makes him vulnerable. So in order to do that, he transports Picard and the crew into a fantasy Robin Hood scenario where Picard is Robin Hood and his crew, much to Worf's dismay, are the Merry Men, and Vash plays the role of Maid Mariam, whom Picard must rescue. So they play Q's game and they rescue Vash, and Q says that I hope you learned your lesson that love makes you vulnerable, but Picard said in fact it made him strong. And so then the crew are returned to the Enterprise except for Vash, who seems really absent, and eventually she reappears and tells Picard that she's formed a partnership with Q, who is going to show her parts of the galaxy that no human has ever seen. And so Picard makes Q promise to him that he'll keep Vash safe, and he does promise that before Vash and Picard kiss goodbye. So one thing I will admit, that when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, like very, very young, I used to think this is how you spelled Cupid. I thought you spelled it Q-Pid, but of course, it's something I learned as I got older. And I heard a lot of people saying that this is one of the best Q pun titles. It actually makes the most sense out of all of them, and yeah, I suppose so, but maybe it doesn't, because Q isn't actually acting like Cupid here. He's actually trying to tear them apart, so maybe the title isn't so great. But anywho, they just love their Q puns. So as I talked about a lot already on my channel, season 4 was the first season of Next Gen I saw. So this, I don't know if this was the first Q episode I saw. I think that it was, although I did go out and rent, if I remember correctly, I rented the VHS of Encounter at Farpoint fairly early on in my watching of TNG. I don't remember if it was before this episode, but it was shortly after, if not. So I did really know who Q was. I don't remember watching this episode and having no idea who Q was. I had no idea who Vash was, because it wasn't until years later that maybe 1 year. Years is a bit of an exaggeration, but it wasn't until like a year later that I saw Captain's Holiday. And also I never saw Deja Q, so I didn't know what Q was referencing about, I owe you a debt. Like, that made no sense to me. And this is one of the episodes that I've, seen the most, along with a lot of episodes of season 4, and I remember loving this episode as a teenager. It was never one of my favorites, I would say, but I definitely thought it was absolutely hilarious and a fun episode. And the older I got and the more Star Trek I saw, the less I grew to appreciate this episode, and to the point where now I just kind of find it too silly and don't really care for it. I think the concept of Vosh coming on board the Enterprise is an interesting one. I think the first half of the episode, before they get into the Robin Hood stuff, is clearly the better part of the episode, and it is an interesting thing to play off of because Picard and Vosh had this romance in Captain's Holiday, but then he was on vacation on Risa, and so how would she integrate into his professional life, and how difficult it must be for Picard to mix his personal and professional life, as his love for Vosh portrays a side of himself that he doesn't want his crew to see, and so that translates to alienating Vosh and acting like very uncomfortable when they're around other people, and of course this would Vosh would not take this very well, and he doesn't intend it to be a slight on her. He just doesn't know how to handle intermixing these two aspects of his life. And I've heard a lot of people defend Picard because a lot of people don't want to mix like their personal life with their love life, especially with a professional setting, especially like showing public displays of affection, like in front of your subordinates if you're at a job situation, is maybe not desirable for a lot of people. Riker, for example, could actually mix all this very freely, but Picard seems a lot more stern with it, and so I think this aspect of the episode I love seeing Vosh like meet everyone else and was able to tell who Riker is immediately, and I was like, oh, if I'm not mistaken, you're gonna tell me that my eyes are as mysterious as the stars. And Riker's just like, you're a Betazoid. She's like, no, I just happen to know Jean-Luc, who actually does a very good impression of you. Now, I want to settle this debate because I've watched a couple of reviews, and I've heard some people interpret that line as Picard is being learned from Riker to pick up women by being all charming and sleazy, and showed that side of him to Vosh. But no, I don't think that's it at all. I think it's very clearly that Picard is mocking Riker in his free time to Vosh, and like does like a Riker impersonation where it goes, oh, your eyes are just as mysterious as the stars. That's what I think happens, and I fucking love it. But anyway, so one of my favorite scenes in this episode, one of the funniest scenes of the episode, is not the stuff that everyone else quotes from the Robin Hood stuff. It's actually when Riker brings Vosh onto the bridge of the Enterprise, and Riker's like, oh, this is one of the council members, Vosh, and introduces her to Geordi and Data, and it's like, oh, hello, and they shake hands, and it's like, and this is Lieutenant Worf, and he says, oh, hello, and goes to shake his hand. But so the hilarious part is, as soon as he brings Vosh on board the Enterprise, just watch Worf's face. He is like brooding. He is like so pissed off. He's like going, oh, like sighing and being like, like, what the fuck kind of look. And then finally, when the Riker introduces her to him, he's just like refuses to shake her hand and is like, I was not informed that council members had access to the bridge. I don't know, I just find that hilarious how much of a stick in the mud Worf is, and even after Riker is like, well, I can think we can make an exception, she's a guest of the captain, he's like, welcome on board. But then he's still like, when she goes to sit in the captain's chair and like puts her feet up in a chair, you still see him like shaking his head going, oh my god. I just think that part is hilarious. But then we get Q showing up wanting to give Picard a gift, and I don't know. Like, this part is okay. This is definitely not one of the better uses of Q. I think it's definitely better than hiding Q and Q Who, because I really hated the use of Q in that episode. But so Q got better in the later seasons, and I stand by this. But this is one of his weaker, I think his weakest episode post season 3. I don't know. It just comes off as annoying. It's not like driving the story like he does in great episodes like Tapestry and All Good Things, or even as interesting as in other episodes like True Q and Deja Q. It's just a little bit annoying. And then this Robin Hood scenario comes up out of nowhere, and is obviously just played for laughs. Now, apparently, the original plan was to do Camelot, which would make themes on a romance that was kind of toxic. But it was decided to, hey, why don't we do Robin Hood? And the reason why was because Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was coming out, and they wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Yeah, nothing really wrong in it. If you don't recall, if you weren't around or don't remember that time, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was huge. It was probably the biggest blockbuster of the year. It was a huge thing, and everyone's making a big deal out of it. So they jumped on that bandwagon. Now, I haven't seen Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, but I've seen pictures of it, and it's obvious from that they modeled Picard's look after that, and probably the look of the whole segment was more modeled off of that than the Prince of Thieves, which I believe wasn't even released yet at the time. Like, if they wanted to emulate Prince of Thieves, then they could have make Picard do a very terrible English accent that was obviously American. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, the Robin Hood stuff is, I don't know, it's just silly to me now. That line that everyone quotes as being the funniest line of the episode, where Worf goes, "I protest, I am not a merry man." I can't even say that without laughing. It is a funny line. It is hilarious, but why would Worf say that? Like, Worf wouldn't say that. That's just too silly for Worf to say something like that upon finding out they're in this Robin Hood fantasy that Q has forced him to go in against their will, and his first thing, his biggest protest that he has to say out of the danger they put the crew in, the inconvenience they put the crew in, the first thing he's going to bring up is, "I am not a merry man." No, I'm sorry. That was clearly done for laughs, but it succeeds because it is funny. But it doesn't actually make sense for his character. And then, alright, so you get apparently there was 2 references in this episode to paying homage to movies. I didn't catch either of them when I first saw it. One I learned about a long time ago, and the other one I just found out about, like I didn't catch it. So one of the homages is when Geordi is playing his, little musical instrument, and Worf comes by, picks it up, just smashes it, and hands it back to him and is like, "Sorry." And I remember finding that hilarious, absolutely hilarious when I first saw that episode. It was by far one of my favorite jokes of the show. But then a couple years after that, I learned that they stole that joke from Animal House, which I had never seen, but something was showing a clip. Like, I was watching some documentary or some special or something, and they were showing a clip of Animal House, and they showed the scene where he was at a party and someone was playing like a hippie acoustic guitar, and he just grabs the guitar and smashes it and hands it back to him and says, "Sorry." And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, they ripped that off from this movie. What the hell? I felt kind of betrayed by that. But, I found out that was intentional. That there was supposed to be an intentional homage to Animal House. Which, I don't know, just taking a joke full cloth from a comedy movie, does that count as an homage and not a ripoff? I mean, I think that's a thin line. I would argue it's more of a ripoff, but despite the fact that they claim it was intentional and they did it on purpose to pay homage to the movie, still feels like you just took that joke. Anyway, the other reference, which I didn't even learn about until yesterday, was apparently the Princess Bride. When Picard is fighting Sir Guy at the end of the episode, and he says something like, "Oh, you should know I am the greatest sword in Nottingham," and then Picard's like, "Well, there's something you should know. I'm not from Nottingham," and then kills him. Apparently that's a Princess Bride reference, and I don't remember that. I like The Princess Bride just as much as the next guy. I think it's a really good movie. It's never been one of my favorites, though. It's not something I watch on a regular basis. I don't go cuckoo gaga over it. I didn't put it in my top 50 movies, didn't even consider it for it. So it's not one of my favorites, and so I don't know it inside and out. So I didn't, even now I don't get that. I don't remember him saying that in Princess Bride, but I'll take their word for it that he did. Something along those lines. I think I vaguely recall something like that, and I vaguely recall that I wasn't impressed by it. I didn't think much of that line, so I think it makes sense that I didn't recognize it here, because I didn't think much of Picard's line either. I'm just like, it just felt weird. Like, why is he saying it? I guess he's saying that because you're saying you're the greatest sword in Nottingham. Well, yeah, I'm not from Nottingham, so I could be greater than you. But it's like, whatever. I don't know. And they don't really do much with this Robin Hood premise, especially as the rest of the crew is concerned. It's just Picard goes off to rescue Vosh on his own and orders Riker and the crew not to come along, which I think is stupid of Picard and kind of out of character for him. Saying, "Oh, this is between me and Q." I'm like, no, like, he wouldn't do that. Like, I don't know. And then him, like, getting Vosh turning on him because she thinks that his plan sucks, which there's been a good argument that was made that if Vosh didn't argue and just went with Picard, that they probably would have gotten away. But anyway, and they showed Vosh, being all deceptive and trying to play Guile and stuff, and Q finding that out. So that was all well and good. I really don't have much to say about the Robin Hood portion of it, because to me it was just goofy. It was unremarkable. I don't think they even took full advantage of it. And the bigger point is, it came out of nowhere. Like, there wasn't built up to. It wasn't like Picard was reading a Robin Hood book earlier or whatever. It's just Q for the fuck of it. Maybe he knew that this episode was airing when Prince of Thieves was about to come out. Q just randomly decided to take them to a Robin Hood setting, which seems like unearned and just out of nowhere. Now, the one thing I would mention about the Robin Hood segment is Ira Stephen Bear wrote this episode. He wasn't on staff on Next Generation at the time. He had quit at the end of season 3, but Michael Piller wanted to bring him back as a freelance writer to write an episode. And when he approached Ira Stephen Bear, he was like, "Oh, no, I don't know if I don't really want to write an episode for Next Generation." And then Michael Piller was like, "Well, it's a Robin Hood themed episode." He's like, "I'm in," because apparently he's a huge fan of Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, and that's clearly what this story was modeled off of. And it shows. And it's kind of fitting because Ira Stephen Bear was the one who wrote Captain's Holiday, so that he would write The Return of Vosh. Seems kind of fitting, but yeah, I think the inaccuracies, the disconnect of the out of character moments of the characters in this episode, I think is due to Ira Stephen Bear not really understanding the characters. As he's been away from the show for a while, and yeah, I think that kind of shows. Not that Ira Stephen Bear is a terrible writer. He's not. He was the showrunner of one of the greatest shows of all time, Deep Space Nine. But I don't know. I feel like, that he been away too long or didn't really get Next Gen when he wrote this episode. But, yeah, as I said, that's pretty much all I gotta say about the Robin Hood stuff. It's pretty unremarkable outside those few jokes that were kind of funny. It was kind of goofy. I guess I should point out, and this is something every review I watch point out, so I'm not being original by pointing this out, but I feel I have to point this out because it's worth noting. It's worth noting that in the fight scenes where they were doing a lot of sword fighting, the only two actors outside of Patrick Stewart, I believe Patrick Stewart knew a little bit of sword fighting, but outside of him, the only two actors who knew any sword fighting or had any training or experience was Marina Sirtis and Gates McFadden, and they were both forbidden to do any sword fighting because they were women. The exact reason given by the director apparently was, well, it's not period appropriate because they didn't have women sword fighting in a time period that this takes place in, therefore it will throw people out of the authenticity. It would make it seem to come off as inauthentic. And got a question. Isn't this like a Q-generated fantasy world? They're not actually in the 12th century. So what the fuck difference does it make? It doesn't have to be authentic because it's not meant to be authentic. It's meant to be a Q-created fantasy. So if women want to fight, fucking let them fight. If they're trained, like, use that training. Like, that is the most ridiculous thing. Instead, they had them smash pots over their heads. Now, to be fair, to present the counterpoint here, I do think I could see the argument being made that it would be out of character for Consulate Troy to be this excellent swords person because she that's not in her character. Like, when she smashes that pot over the guy's head and seems like disturbed by it, like, that seems in character for her because she's a counselor. She's all about helping people in the motions. She's not really like military trained in combat or whatever, and I've never seen her in combat before, and it doesn't seem to fit her character, so it makes sense that fighting is something that she would be uncomfortable with. But, however, on the other hand, is perfectly in character for Dr. Crusher, who we have seen in combat situations before, including with the Borg, which is one of the worst enemies the Federation ever faced. So if they had her sort of fighting, plus she's a dancer, so that makes sense, actually, that she would know how to sword fight as well, because there's a lot of similarities with dancing. So I think that would have made perfect sense to have Dr. Crusher fighting, but regardless, the reason why they didn't have Troy fighting wasn't because it was out of character. It was because it would have seemed inauthentic to have women sword fighting, which is dumbest thing I've ever heard. But again, I know there's some people who would say I'm looking at it through a modern perspective, but whatever. I don't care. Anywho, so yeah, Q as the sheriff of Nottingham was kind of, I don't know. The whole thing was just silly. And then Q appears and tells Picard that, he's going off with Vosh. And Picard makes him promise to protect her and blah, blah, blah. So it was a good ending. Now, I've heard one of the reviews I watched stated that an alternate scenario for this episode that the episode could have taken, that maybe instead of doing a Robin Hood bullshit, that they stuck with, because Vosh was going to beam down to this planet and investigate it, which was illegal, and she could, and it's dangerous, and she could get killed by doing so, and Picard was very upset. So an alternate scenario I heard is that she actually did beam down, and that Picard was had to face the moral dilemma of trying to save her, at the same time not trying to violate their laws as well, and trying to navigate like what he should do. It puts him in like a moral dilemma of professionalism versus like his personal love for her. I think that would have been way more interesting than the Robin Hood bullshit, personally. I think that's a great idea, and they just wanted to have Q do some crazy shit. And I even heard it proposed that If you really wanted Q in this episode, you could also still keep him in that other scenario as well, and have Q be like, oh, Picard, you're going to risk your life, blah, and taunting him about this and saying how, his love for Vosh is going to hurt him or whatever. So you still could have kept Q, but it would have been much better than bringing this Robin Hood bullshit, which really just came out of nowhere and wasn't really that interesting. Anyway, so I don't know. I that's pretty much all. I don't really have much else to say on this episode. So I would like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. Very thankful for everyone's support, but I'll give a very special shout out to Brandon Neilhouse for your support throughout the years. Very much appreciated. But I would also like to give a shout out to Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Manijester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Michelosio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, I saw this when it was originally out, where at the time I only saw 4 episodes from the first 2 seasons until Future Imperfect. The only other time I saw Q was in Encounter at Farpoint, and I groaned when he appeared, and then furthermore, a little more than halfway through the episode, we get the Robin Hood stuff, which at the time the Kevin Costner movie was out, and there was a Robin Hood craze, and I rolled my eyes and was frustrated after seeing a lot of novel or authentic Trek episodes. We have the scenario to where Picard is Robin Hood. Erg. Since then, the episode can be further criticized for the women's roles, especially since Vosh is hardly a damsel in distress, and she exemplifies as such, and that Sirtis and McFadden, who were trained in fencing, were directed to throw clay pots at people instead. Yes, in terms of humor, Worf's temperament is classic, but cute moments such as this less than desired. As for Picard not telling anyone at all about Vosh, yes, she was right to be ticked off, and was probably a reason why in some ways even Picard may sabotage his efforts to interest someone almost as bad as Geordi. Until the Q and the Gray, this was my bottom Q episode, which, considering what has happened since then, Picard Season 2 may not seem that bad now in hindsight. 1 not a merry man out of 10. Yeah, you're much, much harsher on this episode than I am. I'll say that out front. And I also had a different experience, because I also, as I said, Encounter at Farpoint was the only other time I saw Q as well. Although I might have seen this first, I don't remember, because I remember liking Q a lot, and I think it might have been from this episode, because I originally loved this episode as a newbie. It was like relatable and comic booky, although I didn't see it when it first aired, so it was well after the Robin Hood phase had died down from Prince of Thieves, or at least a year after. But in fact, when I learned it came out the same time as Prince of Thieves, that was news to me. I completely forgot about it. And honestly, watching a lot of these TNG episodes, I am surprised whenever anyone places them in time that they came out at the same time as all this stuff from the late 80s and early 90s, and because it seems more recent to me. Maybe just because I watch it a lot more frequently, and a lot of the stuff from the 90s and early 90s and late 80s I hadn't seen in decades, but I don't know. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, I like this episode. It was fun to watch the crew of the Enterprise as character from Robin Hood. How did the crew learn to be good with using swords, especially Picard, who very easily killed Sir Guy of Gisborne? Maybe they used the program that Reg Barkley made in Hollow Pursuits. I guess the holodeck has a recycling bin. Q may have set the level too easy to give the crew a chance. Vosh appeared in one episode of The X-Files as Walter Skinner's ex-wife. I saw Qpid well before the captain goes to a brothel planet episode. I never liked this fling between Vosh and Picard. There is only one character she was suited for, and that was Quark. If you close your eyes while watching these 3 episodes that Vosh appeared in the Trek universe, you may think she was a female Ferengi. Picard showed his true colors toward Vosh in the last scene with Q. He didn't even try to stop her from going with Q. He said blah, 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 blah about Q and then kissed Vosh goodbye. Then he made some old Grey or Earl Grey tea. That was the end of that chapter. Or maybe you meant to say old Grey tea as a pun, I'm not sure. Anyway, Picard's relationship with Nella Darren was way better than Vosh and felt like a real relationship. I would even say the Inner Light felt more real than Vosh's fake relationship. I will explain in my out of 10, which has gone out of control, but it's fun, and maybe one day I will write my whole comment out of 10. I think Mark's head just exploded while reading that last sentence. Not far off. So my rating is 6. I think Picard was more interested in the mystery of the Taxu Tot than Vosh, and what is the first thing you do when you connect with someone on a holiday and about to go home? Let me think you get her or his contact information, i.e. phone number and email, so you can keep in touch with them. One last thing, it's bullshit that Picard never told anyone about Vosh, because he is a private man. He didn't say anything because he didn't give a feck about her, and she was just a booty call. Out of 10. Oh god, yeah, that out of 10 doesn't even make much sense, but that's okay. I obviously like your long out of 10 stuff. So a couple of things. First, I do buy that Picard was able to kill Sir Guy of Gisborne because he was shown to be fencing, and I think that to this point there was only one episode that he was shown to be fencing in, which was We'll Always Have Paris, but there was the deleted scene in Measure of the Man that also showed him fencing, and then of course we see him fencing later in I, Borg. I think maybe there was another episode I'm forgetting, but it was shown that he was well trained with fencing, so I actually do buy that. The fact that his other crew knew how to sword fight so well, that, didn't buy so much. Like Geordi was doing like a kick-ass job as well, where did he learn how to fence? But anyway, as far as Vosh and Picard, I gotta disagree with you there. And I mentioned this in my review for Captain's Holiday as well, is that I do buy their relationship. And the thing is, especially when you compare it to Nella Darren, that relationship was a bit flat, and I can see why it fizzled out, because she was too much like him. And I think there is truth in the saying opposites attract, because a lot of times differences can fill in the gaps. Differences that a partner has can fill in the gaps that you have, so it sort of complement each other in different ways, because you each fulfill something that the person's missing. Whereas if you have like Nella Darren or someone like that, where the personalities are so similar, then it becomes kind of repetitive and bland, and you don't really get anything new out of it, if that makes any sense. So I totally buy the way his portrayal of Vosh is portrayed in both episodes. I buy that he was really enticed with her. because that her being so adventurous and sort of scoundrelly did excite him and fill in missing pieces of his life, but he would have been too ashamed to admit that to other people, which is why he never mentioned it to the crew. And so when she came on board, he felt very uncomfortable because it was like revealing a part of himself that he didn't want his coworkers to know. So overall, I actually think that part worked beautifully, but that is just me. We'll have to agree to disagree on that one. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, well, the story is totally silly, but still it's a fun episode to watch. I like how the whole ensemble is having this adventure together. Does Data always carry such an explosive device in his arm? This would have been very useful in a lot of situations. I never noticed how many guest characters from the first 3 seasons return in the 4th season, although I find Vash much less interesting than the other characters we saw again in the last episodes. My rating is 6 out of 10. Well, I'll have to disagree with that as well, because I think Vash is way more interesting than Leah Brahms. And they never should have brought Leah Brahms back. But that is just my opinion. Some of the other characters they bring back, like the Traveler, and who else do they bring back? Kalar. Like, sure, Vash is not as good as them. But, yeah, I don't think she's that bad. Anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Qpid, more like stupid. Okay, in all seriousness, I remember seeing this one on TV in the 90s when it was airing. It was probably all I knew of Trek until the 2010s when I got Netflix and watched all the shows. So to me, all I remember about TNG was they did Robin Hood once. I like the episode just fine for what it is, and it's a great meme line from Worf. I must protest. I am not a merry man. That's weird. I didn't realize that you didn't get into Trek until the 2010s. That's a lot more recent. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, this episode was okay. It's certainly a way better Q episode than the first 3 appearances, including Q Who. This is not a step up from Deja Q, but it was decent. This was a nice side episode that was silly and fun. I also liked the return of Vash. Always get great to see her and Picard together, but I really hated her and Q's appearances on D Space Nine, as I think they went nowhere and it was just nostalgia bait for DS9. They should have brought her back in another TNG episode, but in the near future I will give my thoughts on that episode when it comes. But like I said, okay episode, so my rating is a 6 out of 10. Well, there's a lot of 6 out of 10s, except for Norman, who gave it a 1. But yeah, that seems to be the consensus so far. It's 6 out of 10. But yeah, I totally agree on DS9. She shouldn't have appeared there. They should have brought her back on TNG so she could have been reunited with Picard. I think that Q-less episode in Deep Space Nine was terrible. And it was before Deep Space Nine really found its own voice, and they were just trying to do a ratings boost with bringing Q on. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neilhouse, who says, Kyrie091 beat me to it, of course, but I call this episode stupid as well. I loved Robin Hood as a kid. I tried archery and discovered it doesn't work well when you're left-handed. My father was named after Robin Hood. Why is Picard behaving like Geordi smitten by a woman? Having a fling with somebody is nobody's business save the people involved. Why does Picard have such a stick up his arse? I would have gone back in time and seen Tegas 3 in its heyday in a heartbeat. The Robin Hood plot is tiresome, or maybe I've seen the Errol Flynn movie too many times. Q and Vash deserve each other. Still, it could be worse. The original idea of this plot was supposed to be based on Camelot. Patrick Stewart was too old for this crap, and so am I. 2 female cast members were forbidden to fight on the grounds that they are women out of 10. So that's another really low rating at 2. Yeah, so I totally agree with that Tegas 3, which Picard going back in time to see Tegas 3. I don't think it fits with his character for him to deny that. Maybe you could argue that he was just so pissed off with Q and didn't want him to be there, but I've heard a lot of people argue that he should have done that in order to get Q out of his hair. He should have been like, oh yeah, sure. And like some people described him as an archaeology geek, which is definitely as he comes off in this episode. So think of how much of a geek fantasy that would be to travel back in time to actually see the things he's studying compared to what he thought he knew and see how they actually were. Like, that would be a dream come true. And more than that, after Q did that, he could be like, okay, Q, you did that for me, now go away. And Q would go away. It would have avoided this whole thing, but then again, there wouldn't be a Robin Hood episode if they did that, so it was all plot contrivance. But for me, it would have made it would have been more interesting as an episode, honestly. Like, I wanted them to go back in time to this, and maybe we could have made a whole episode about that, about comparing what the archaeologists thought they knew with what happened, and then once Q brings Picard back, and then we have the difficulty of Vosh. Like, there's a good episode to be had here that they could have done if they just gotten rid of this stupid Robin Hood bullshit. Although I will disagree with Brandon that Camelot would have been worse. I actually think it would have fit better with the themes of the episode than Robin Hood, but that is just me. So, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So, my rating for Qpid out of 10, it's going to be a 5 average, so I'm slightly lower than all the patrons who gave it a 6, but nowhere near as low as Norman and Brandon, who apparently really didn't like this episode. I didn't hate it that much, and I still acknowledge, like, I think the storyline with Vosh and Picard makes a lot of sense, and I think it fits their characters very well, and I think that first half of the episode is actually quite good and kind of funny. Has to say, I think the funniest part of the episode was when Vosh was on the bridge and Worf was brooding and sighing and looking all pissed off. I just find that so hilarious. But of course you get the I am not a merry man, which obviously is funny, even though it's completely out of character and contrived. Still hilarious. I mean, some of the best jokes are. But, and that's the thing, I talked about this before, if they do out of character or random jokes like that in Lower Decks, I'm way more forgiving because Lower Decks is a comedy show. You expect it for that. A drama show, like a normal Star Trek show or like TNG, if they do something out of character, it just hits me wrong because it's not meant to be a crazy comedy show. But that's, maybe I got preconceived notions of genre or whatnot, but that's just the way I am. And again, I'm not saying it's not funny. It definitely is funny, but it's also out of character and stupid at the same time. And the whole breaking the guitar and saying sorry lost its sting. I used to love that joke, but as soon as I heard that they just ripped that joke whole cloth from Animal House, I didn't like it as much anymore after learning that. Maybe that's unfair too, but that is just how I feel. But regardless, there's some humor in it, there's some fun in it, there's some good character stuff with Picard and Vosh, so enough to give it a 5, but overall, this is not a very good use of Q. It was silly, and the whole Robin Hood stuff was dumb and didn't need to be there, so not more than a 5. I don't think it's enough to get a 6. It's definitely more towards the negative side of okay for me. Anyway, that is it for my review of Qpid. So, let me just bring up my schedule to see what's coming up. So, Monday I'll be over on Patreon for a Patreon exclusive revisited video where I'll be revisiting my review for The Drumhead. That's over on Patreon for Patreon supporters. And then on Wednesday, back public on my main channel for my review of Half a Life. Not to spoil my thoughts on that episode, but I've been on record saying clearly the best Luoxin and Troy episode ever. Very clearly. And Thursday, of course, I'll be reviewing the newest episode of Discovery. And on Saturday, back with another public video for The Host, reviewing the first appearance of the Trill, who aren't really the Trill. But anyway... So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out for that, and be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.